Afternoon, welcome to Daily Sport Locker Room Podcast. Great to have the two lads back, Daniel and Ryan. Ryan, a wee sabbatical last week. I think big news coming in from was it Venice, Ryan? Venice. Congratulations on all.
Barcelona, and then over to Venice for the big
You spent a
big.
large part of your time in Venice down in one knee here. Is that right?
That's right, Stevie. Yeah, bit of good news for you.
Yeah. Congratulations anyway, Ryan. Wishes all the best. But lads, an action packed weekend in Championship football again. Obviously, nowhere else to start except Celtic Park. I know we were chatting about the game before, and we were chatting about it last week, and we were sort of eagerly anticipating it. And it was probably, from a neutral perspective, it was a bit of a damp squib in how it panned out. But certainly from Derry's perspective, it's very worrying. But I'd like to talk about Armagh, lads. And I have to say now, Ryan, you've mentioned this point about the galvanised nature of the group just after losing an Ulster final, but not losing an Ulster final in what's the right word to say here? Like probably in a more heartbreaking manner than another penalty shootout defeat, Ryan. And from an emotional point of view, like that would have taken a huge amount out of that group. But it really shows the solidity of the group. It really shows the real solid nature, the real togetherness, the real team spirit. And I'll tell you another thing: a group that playing for their manager, Ryan. When you look at that performance yesterday.
Yeah, just exactly what you said, Stephen. I 100% agree. And actually, obviously, texting to the group there yesterday when I was watching Armagh, I said credit to them because like they have been so unlucky in a number of big games. And you could turn around and say, well, maybe boys will drop off the squad. You hear of stories maybe happening in the Derry camp where there's a bit of discontent. But Armagh, like they responded as it turns out, Westmeath aren't a bad team. They have been very competitive throughout this campaign, got the job done against Westmeath. And then the performance that they put in yesterday, like fair enough, Derry maybe aren't at the level that they're at, but the response is the big thing. Like the setback to that Ulster final, to lose it 2 years in a row, the way that they'd lose it on penalties, it shows that there's a togetherness in that squad. I don't see anybody dropping off. And also McGeeney, obviously, like he's God for them players and they will do anything for him. So I would give massive credit to that Armagh squad.
Yeah, and Ledge, like it's hard to believe, Ledge, like that. This was a manager who at the start of this year, there was a vote being held in the clubs in Armagh, do they keep or do we get rid? Like, and it's sort of that old adage: you careful what you wish for, in that respect. And I've always said, and I've been a long-standing admirer of the job that Kieran has done with that group. He didn't inherit an All Ireland winning team. He inherited a group of players who were sitting and languishing at the foot of Division Three, Ledge. In the first couple of years he was in, there was a bit of criticism. I think they didn't get out of three in his first year, and then a bit, but they had to build from three, and now you would highly regard them as a top eight side in Ireland consistently. Like, albeit hasn't had the silverware, but again, when you measure success over the last 8 years, there's only two counties have won the All Ireland, so like it is something that probably Armagh people need to be careful what they wish for in that respect because they have a good management team there, Daniel.
Yeah, we'll go back and ask Kildare about getting rid of him, and look where they are now. So,
Yeah, true.
like, it's in fairness to McGee, what I will say is I think, and we're going to chat a little bit about Armagh later on, but I think just from externally looking out to keep taking the hits that they do, and some of them are self-inflicted as well. But to keep coming back, as you said, and I always think, and you talk a little bit about Armagh club football, I think those lads just totally give themselves to the county setup. I think their county setup is like a club team, and what for me, I think where he started was with the conditioning, like the size and the power that
Yeah.
they have, not just from 1 to 15 or 1 to 17 or 1 to 18. They have probably 30 players who are all capable. Like, look at Niall Grimley coming in there at the weekend, able to do a job. Tierney Kelly coming back in, like after missing a little bit of time
Yeah.
previously last year and that. And these lads are all big physical men who are, as you say, are 100% bought into everything that their manager is asking them to do. And look, I think externally you can only be impressed by how they conduct themselves, how they keep coming back after these big hits. I think they're actually prime team for Croke Park. I think they're a prime team to be challenging, but there is an element that I think they have to get sorted out. And like if you said to Kieran McGeeney, what would be your perfect scenario for this weekend? Derry to come push up really high, give cheap turnovers, and allow us to counter in behind them. That was the perfect setup from Armagh. Armagh can rip a team asunder like that. We talked last week about the danger of high turnovers, and I think in most games this weekend, like Cork and Donegal, prime example, Derry Armagh, prime example, even the Loud Monaghan game, prime example. High turnovers are dangerous, and even just for the 15 minutes where Derry retreated a small bit, stepped off a couple of kickouts and started to squeeze things out, Armagh showed a little bit of impatience. And I think if they can get rid of that little bit of that element of when things get tight and teams don't give them those transition opportunities, if they can sort that out, I think they have a team made for Croke Park from a conditioning point of view. We always talk about being able to kick. They can kick. They're really aggressive defensively, and they have some serious ballers up top. I think all the ingredients are there for Armagh. I think they're just missing that 5% still.
Yeah, and Ryan, just what Les talked about conditioning there, like the importance of physical conditioning. Like, and I know the comments from Brian Sheehan last week that were creating, athletes and not footballers, etc. But the top teams, Ryan, it's what separates that real top bracket from the rest is the levels of physical conditioning. Like, and I suppose one of the big things about S&C, I'm not an S&C expert, I'm not in the field, but I know from listening to players and having worked in high performance environments, you need a level of consistency with your S&C. And the fact that they've been able to retain Julie Davis for such a long period of time, she knows the background of the players know her. There's probably a good working relationship there as well with the management team. There's a trust being built up as well. The players obviously carry a huge amount of respect for her, and like that's a huge advantage, Ryan, in any setup when you've got that consistency. Where, for example, take my own county there Down, for example, and people giving off bit of condition and stuff like this. I know Johnny Davis is in this year, actually a brother of Julie's, but like for years, like Down at an S&C coach for a year, then he was gone, then another one came in, and then he's new ideas, and then he's gone, then there's one there for a year and a half, and then he's gone. And like that's not good for a player either, Ryan, when you've got an S&C man, because every S&C coach probably comes in with their own ideas. It is a sort of a field where I think everyone is doing the same stuff, but people like to be different and say, well, this doesn't work, because I personally find it sometimes a very ego-driven environment as well, where I'm better than him, and what he's doing is wrong, but they have that level of consistency, like, which is so important. Like.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, the S&C is nearly similar to a physio in that with time they get to know players, they get to know maybe what they're capable of doing. And I think having somebody, Julie Davis seems to be there a long time. She might have even been with Kieran whenever he was with Kildare. So I think that consistency, it's nearly like the players trust her, but also she can trust the players that she knows if they're bluffing or if they're actually genuinely maybe need to pull back on their load. She's been there a while now where she can say, well, look, Aidan Falker's maybe 32, 33. Maybe he doesn't have to do this session. So as you said there, I think that's a massive part of it. Obviously, technical coaches and bringing in the likes of Kieran Donaghy and McKeever and Conleth Gilligan, that's different. That's on the pitch. You're maybe going to try and change the way you play. But from a physical point of view, it's evident that them Armagh boys have consistently been doing it over a number of years. And obviously, Julie knows them players inside out. So it works both ways. And look, that's the great thing about keeping a squad together is that you're not having, Barry McCambridge played yesterday. He's been on that squad now consistently for the last number of years, stuck at it. Probably didn't get as much game time as he would have liked. Tiernan Kelly, as Dan mentioned, is another example. Didn't play much last year, but has still been doing the work. Came in there yesterday and didn't look out of place. Physically, he had all the attributes.
Niall Grimley as well.
Niall Grimley, perfect example.
Yeah.
These lads are doing the training and they're doing it on a consistent basis.
Well, that's interesting there, Ryan. You talked about, Gilligan came in and there was an interesting interview, Daniel, with the two O'Neills after the match. And they talked about, obviously, the quality of work that they have and the quality they have in their background team. And there's some question that all those men that are involved in that background team have all coached at a really, really good level and have all good experience at coaching as well at this stage. But they talked about Gilligan, and when he came in, the first thing he'd almost done a forensic analysis of the substitutions and the impact of the substitutions. And we know, man, how important having a deep bench is, Daniel. Particularly when you go into the latter stages of the championship, being able to trust those players in the white heat of battle. Dublin's bench for years was what they were most feared about. And developing that bench, as Ryan talked about, for you to hang about as a squad. And to hang about a panel for so long and maybe not get that much game time, like, it does speak volumes of it must be a really good environment to be in, lads, But it's interesting, like, because you look at the substitutions yesterday. Ross McQuillan got a goal, Jason Duffy came on, Oisin O'Neill got a point, Shane McPartland got a point, Aidan Nugent got a point. The impact coming off the bench, like there's probably Jason Duffy and Aidan Nugent, who were big players last year from Armagh from the start, now can't get a game, and they're only coming in obviously off the back of their Cullyhanna All-Ireland winning success. So it is, Ledge, important, like, obviously having that deep bench, but then obviously, Ledge, having a happy panel. And you always said to me it was that sort of number between, what did you always say to me, it was like from number 25 to 30, they're nearly the most important people in the squad.
Yeah, and sometimes that gets commented on in a kind of a glib way, but it really is the truth, because if they feel disengaged and kind of don't feel like they're serving a purpose other than being cones at training, well, that's it's very hard for those players to keep driving standards. And look, I think it's probably the way it's sold as well. and how it's framed to the players, I think. And look, this is where things become, as you say, when you look at the data then, and you look at, like, there's no doubt, I guarantee all those lads you mentioned that were coming in off the bench, they want to be starting. There's no two ways that they're sitting there saying, oh, I'm delighted to be playing my last 15 minutes finisher, or whatever you want to call it. They want to be playing. But this has obviously been sold as a package, and whether that's, as you say, whether that's the data around the ability they have to score, maybe when things loosen up, maybe they don't suit the style of play in certain games. It could be like horses for courses, depending on the day. Like, I think there's no doubt Armagh stacked that middle specifically with Derry in mind to go after that kick out again, because anything that went long, Armagh absolutely destroyed. So that could be different again, maybe for the Galway game next week. They might look at that in a slightly a different way. But I think that's the sale of the package. And I would imagine, like, there's conversations happening. This is probably, I know there's drawbacks to having big management teams, where the messaging might be different. But if your head man has delegated the work properly, and each of the coaches are kind of saying the same things, you can split up that conversation between 3-4 coaches to 3 or 4 different players, and be able to sit down and go through a little bit of video work and be able to say, right, this is what we're looking for in this scenario, this is what we're looking for in that scenario. When you get in on Sunday, this is what we want from you. And I think that makes players feel valued. Like, we always talk about fairness, that player wants to feel like they all get the same amount of time, whether they're starting centre back or whether they're number 28. But what it does speak to, it speaks to really good management, and it speaks to massive buy-in from players. So again, we're only speaking from the outside, but contrast the two camps, the Derry camp and the Armagh camp. Like, Derry almost look to be playing in protest, where Armagh look, in fairness, no matter what the result is, and they always come back and they always look like they're 100% bought into what they're doing.
Yeah, and without probably laboring about what's going on in Derry, because there obviously is some really, really, really deep, significant issues there. Just to sort of follow up what Ledge is saying there, Ryan, from a tactical point of view, yesterday I came across Blaine Hughes. Blaine is a really good goalkeeper, and I came across him the year Roscommon played them in that playoff, Division 1 playoff, and he picked holes in the press. And look, there was probably a bit of both. Like, it was probably a press, probably a 1 or 2 men that were maybe bluffing in that press that day, but there certainly was an element of composure, coolness, calmness, and some of the kickouts ran that he got away to the top of the D, and obviously Armagh had a very, very defined kickout strategy as well. They were creating a lot of space. They were presenting for short kickouts, but the confidence that he had, I thought his display yesterday was absolutely outstanding, right? Outstanding.
I agree, Stephen. And look, Blaine, you could argue, has got a raw deal potentially. Like, he had been the number one, as you talked about there, that Roscommon game. I'm sure that was a couple of years ago. All of a sudden, Ethan Rafferty comes on board and Blaine is number 2. And then this year, Blaine has been given the trust of getting the number 1 spot. And even I remember coming up to that Ulster final, Ethan Rafferty obviously had picked up an injury. A lot of people were saying, I wonder will he go with Rafferty today? And he didn't. He put complete trust into Blaine Hughes, and you can see that in his performances. Like, he is playing with total confidence. And that's what I'm saying about McGeaney. Whatever way he's able to control these players to make them feel like, if you're doing it in the training pitch, I'll back you. Because Ross McQuillan, as you talked about yesterday, he didn't get much game time. Barry McCambridge didn't get much game time this year. Both of them boys played really big parts yesterday in a really big game. So going back to your point, Blaine Hughes is playing brilliant stuff, but obviously that comes from the trust that McGeaney has put in him. If you look at the Dublin setup, it's nearly always like, once Cluxton comes back, Cluxton's going to be the number 1. That's not necessarily the point in Armagh. If Ethan Rafferty is back and playing, if Blaine Hughes is doing the business, he's still my number 1. So fair play for the response he has made since being dropped last year.
Yeah, and the long kick out again, Ledge. You talked about, you used the word you used the word kryptonite here to describe, a blanket defense for Armagh, but it's Derry's kryptonite at the minute, because, like, how many times it was nearly like watching a repeat on TV, of a replay of a goal from a game 4 or 5 games ago, and you were going like, how are they leaving themselves in this situation, like, time and time and time again? And there may be an element of stubbornness here. Like, I know Sean Kavanagh. I think, to be fair to Kavanagh, I think Kavanagh's issue with Mickey Hart is personal. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but no, but it has got very personal. And look, he did sort of put the knife in and said Mickey's a stubborn man, and we all know Mickey is a stubborn man, and he's a very driven man, but I sort of made this point to the boys today as well. There's an element of ego about a coach and a manager too. Like, so for example, I was saying to the boys about Liverpool with Klopp, like, and how great a manager Klopp is. But every dog in the street could see that his problem was Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back, and every team used to focus on it and really attack it. But he did nothing to address it. And is there an element, Daniel, of the same with Mickey? Is that, do you know what? This has worked for us for so long. Why are we going to change now because of that game? But yet they've been caught, Ledge, time and time again since the Donegal game.
Yeah, I actually don't mind. I don't mind them pressing the kick out. I think it's just the way they structure it is the problem more than anything else. And like, I think they're really and in the last, it's only been since the Donegal game. I think they've been really passive in contests in the air. Like it looks like they're not getting there. Like if you're playing, let's say four at the back of your press, four in the second line, and three in your first line, your full forward line. You want your four biggest, strongest jumpers at the back of that press. But quite frequently, Derry seem to have lads who maybe that's not their strong suit at the back of that press, whether it's Lynch, even McFall was at the back of it yesterday. Like don't get me wrong, McFall, a good footballer, but I'm not sure he's your big presence around the middle of the field that you want contesting. Like I actually think it's a structural thing that they have, and again, this comes back to I get the look at this for me anyway, and I think I've been there in years gone by with different managers. I'm not sure the players are 100% bought into what's happening. That's what it looks like to me, and it looks like the players are kind of doing it just for the sake of doing it. And there probably could be some truth in Kavanagh's comments about the stubbornness. There probably is, but I think it's how they're actually applying it rather than being totally the wrong thing at this stage. At this stage, though, to be fair, I'd be kind of, and they did it for, let's say, the last 10 minutes of the first half, where they started to drop off a small bit and they started to condense the field, and they actually looked much better. But on Sunday, they were in this quandary then where they actually had to go and press a small bit because they were still, like, they got it back to what? They got it back to 5 points at one stage, and then long kick out, Rian O'Neill's goal. Like, Armagh actually looked iffy up until that point. They butchered a couple of goal chances and they just got it into the right man's hands to kill the game. But I think it's more of a structural issue. I don't think the back of Derry's press, I don't think is the four jumpers that you want. I think it's too mixed and matched. And look, even the idea of, yes, I'm all for getting players high up the field, but how often was Chrissy McKaigue standing on the top of the D? Chrissy McKaigue is one of your best man markers. Let him man mark. I mean, I'm all for flooding players, absolutely no problem at all. But you can't be reckless with it. And what yours, and you saw this a few times the weekend. Our Derry never had a deep anchor or a deep quarterback, whatever you want to call it. They almost had this flat line across the middle of the field. That's really hard. That's really hard to make players work. Like it's asking for a turnover. If your anchor or your quarterback is playing 20 yards deep, 30 yards deep, that stops that turnover. Let's say for the goal that Tiernan Kelly set up from that turnover, that stops that from happening because you're taking it away from contact. I think there's I don't necessarily mind what they're doing, but I think there's serious structural issues around it, and I don't think the players are 100% buying into it.
Yeah, and only two changes made as well, Ryan. Like Keir McFall came in for Bradley, like two players, Emmett Bradley and Keir McFall, who didn't feature under Rory Gallagher at all. Are back in the team, and another red card as well, which to back up what Daniel says there, Ryan, it sort of makes you think like, there's obviously something deeper rooted in it, and there's obviously some truth in it. And it's amazing because, they had such a good National League, Ryan. They played so well. I thought they were brilliant in the National League. And then you're sort of thinking to yourself, did they peak too soon? They were playing, at a high energy from day one in January. And you're probably thinking, was there an element of maybe they've just gone fucking too hard too soon, and they're now hitting a flat spot. It could be something like that.
I think Derry definitely, Stephen, aren't as defensively organised as they had been last year. And I think what they were looking at is they were saying, if we want to win All Ireland, that was their big goal. They'd won the last two Ulsters. If we want to win All Ireland, we need to be more front foot. We probably need to play higher up the pitch. And they were probably looking at Dublin as the template. Dublin, a lot of the time, are full of going man on man. And I think that's the way Derry played a lot of the time, even in that league final. But then when you're coming up in Ulster, against Ulster teams that have so much time to focus in, like Donegal really focused in on the game plan. Fair enough, Armagh did change their way as a result. But see, yesterday, Derry, Conor Turbot was interviewed after the game, and I think the interviewer asked him, were you surprised at how Derry set up? And he said, no, we weren't, because Mickey Hart must have come out after the last game and said, we're not going to change. This is the way we play. We're not going to change it. And I think then that probably said to the Armagh lads, well, this is definitely our game plan, because they're not going to change the way they've been playing. And I don't know, I think you got to change it up, or you got to some play to what you're faced with. As you talked about, 2018 final, Tyrone got a real good head start in Dublin. And Dublin, you have to put your pride to one side sometimes. Dublin just said, well, hold on, let's just drop off here. Let's just drop off and get ourselves back into the game. And I think Derry yesterday, they were still playing the exact same way, and Armagh had the work done on them on the training ground. They knew what they were going to do to rip them apart.
Yeah, and it's like, I suppose, like in any battle, whether it's a war, or whether it's a football match or whatever, you go into a battle and you become very predictable. You become easy to beat then, and if you go into a war and you're setting traps and you're obviously trying to counter the opposition. Like, just come in with something different. Come in on the blind side. Come in something. Throw a curveball in just for talk's sake. Two big men edge of the square, long diagonal ball, first 15 minutes. All of a sudden, geez, we weren't prepped for this, and it can put a bit of a spanner in the works. But Ledge, like for a midfield who we were talking about being one of the best in the country, now looks just completely defunct, like Glass and Rodgers, to the extent that even yesterday they moved Rodgers out of midfield and brought in Emmett Bradley, hoping maybe that sort of Glenn combination of Bradley and Glass would reignite it again. But that's a man that's played a lot of football recently, Ledge too as well, Conor Glass. Like, they look a tired team. They do look a tired team, Daniel.
Yeah, and do you know what? Like the amount of times, let's say that Glass and even Rodgers at times in transition or in attack will find themselves playing on the top of the square. And like several times yesterday, Glass won a mark. He was in there for 3 or 4 different occasions. And when Donegal or when Derry were given such frequent turnovers around the middle third, that's an extra 130 meters he's having to work back down the field. And because he's getting inside so often, I think that's increasing his workload a huge amount, and that's just a structural thing. Like, I think, look, we were all lauding this style of play from Derry for the whole league. We really were, but that's because they weren't given cheap turnovers. That's ultimately what the problem here with all this. Like, you look at what Armagh actually created yesterday. Okay, fair enough. The Reno Neal goal, long kick out. Okay, grand. But the other 2 goals are from a brutal hand pass from Brendan Rodgers and from a really let's call it a sloppy turnover. Inter-county players shouldn't be getting dispossessed one-on-one, 50, 60 meters from goal. That just shouldn't be happening with the numbers that are there. Now, that's partially because of what I was talking about earlier with having no quarterback sitting that bit deeper. But like, you take those two goals out of it, and it's the same as the Donegal game. Like, I think there's just such basic errors that are actually highlighting everything else and making everything else look worse. And there's no doubt about it. I think the players look fatigued mentally, even. Even if I'm sure if you went to their stats and their GPS, probably all some similar numbers, but they're not playing with that same verve and that same edge that they had previously. For whatever reason, I don't know, but it's just the turnovers are the killer. And if you can actually, I think you can just narrow it down to that one thing: stop turning the ball over so cheaply. They're competitive yesterday,
And there's a reference in RT yesterday, Ryan, about the team holiday, or the not the team holiday, the training camp or whatever. That's something maybe was ignited on the training camp and possibly caused a bit of a breakdown in the spirit within the group as well, with old club rivalries maybe coming to the fore. And that's only hearsay. We can't sort of say that happened, but certainly there just doesn't seem to be the same level of spirit there, Ryan, as there has been over the last number of years. Like, and you can see that in a group. Like,
well, I suppose, Stephen, once they beat Dublin, Derry were, they really believed probably within the squad that this is we're on a path here to win All Ireland. Like, they no doubt felt that we get through the Ulster campaign and it's there for us. We'll probably meet Dublin down the line. And that Donegal defeat, like, they were ripped apart that day. The game was over after 50 minutes. And then they went up and just probably we talked about how will they react over the next 2 weeks in training. There was probably a wee bit of friction. There might have been, a wee bit of aggro. McKinless goes and gets sent off then against Galway. And if McKinless stays on the pitch, who knows? Derry might have got a win there and all of a sudden they reignite their campaign. Yeah. That then has transferred then over from that Galway game where they threw it away early. McKinless gets sent off for 20 minutes. Game's gone. And then I felt yesterday as well, once Armagh got them couple of turnovers, as Dan talked about, it was nearly like the Derry boys said, this system is a fucking disaster. They threw in the towel. They lost belief. They didn't keep playing as if to say it'll come for us. They just, the way Donegal 3 points down got into the last results of final. They still believed in their manager and their game plan. I just got the feeling yesterday, once a few things went wrong, boys started doing their own thing, playing as individuals, and they didn't believe in the system or their game plan or what their coaches had been putting through them on the training pitch. And they probably, like Westmeath, are a dangerous opponent. I still think Derry have enough. But it depends how they react now over the next 2 weeks.
Well, the beating yesterday means that a draw against Westmeath puts them out, right? Because Westmeath only have a score difference of -8, or -9, whereas Derry have a score difference of a lot more significant. I think it's -13 or 14. So a draw will put Derry out. and that game's played in a neutral venue. Westmeath will be difficult to break down. They'll play very defensively. If like we looked at the turnover that Westmeath gave away yesterday for their goal, the Shane Mulch one, it was a very carbon copy. Like Westmeath they give Galway their fill of it, they give Armagh their fill of it. But the timing of games is interesting, lads, because we're going to move on a wee bit now and chat about, and we'll come back and talk about that scenario of actually getting through a group with one draw and not having won a game. Like I don't know how you can not win a game in 3 and still qualify. Roscommon and Cavan are in a very similar situation as well, where if Roscommon draw with Cavan, Roscommon go through without having won a game in 4 games, and it doesn't seem to me to be a really good way of a good system of running the competition. But we'll chat about that later. But Donegal, Ledge, we talked about timing of games. Like if Donegal had played Clare in the first game and won, and then got beat by Cork, imagine going to Tyrone next week. With it, and you just all of a sudden there's just a different mentality. Whereas now that defeat, this is the perfect game for Donegal now, Ledge, coming against Clare, because they've taken a hard lesson yesterday, having shipped 3 goals. McGuinness will be distraught at having conceded 3 goals, and he'll pride himself on those. But he talked about that magic word, Ledge, that you mentioned as well. He says turnovers. His interview was all about the turnovers we give away. It was uncanny, and it just costs you, Ledge. It just costs you so much.
Yeah, 100%. And like it's amazing how few goals you see these days that are actually created. How many goals are coming from mistakes? It's unbelievable. How many scores in general actually are coming from kickouts or mistakes, one side of the ball or the other. It's incredible, but yeah, like it's a perfect kick in the arse for Donegal, isn't it? Like, I mean, they'll rectify that. They probably, I won't say they took their eye off the ball. I think that'll be unfair to Cork, but they looked from what we saw in the highlights. Obviously, that's another issue, we couldn't see it, but from what we saw in the highlights, they looked slightly lethargic. Didn't look 100% of themselves. Now, in fairness, they managed to get themselves back close enough, but ultimately Cork had that bit of extra juice. But that was fine. That's a perfect little tonic for Donegal to kind of say to themselves, right, boys, when we get off script ever so slightly, this is what can happen, and that's why I still think the Donegal still aren't quite there yet. I mean, like Dublin, probably even Kerry go win that game. Well, actually, Kerry maybe, but the top teams will probably win that game regardless. Whereas if Donegal aren't 100% at it, they drop down into not the average category, but they're not quite where they are. But as you say, the timing is just magnificent. And as you say, if Derry could have played that first game, and played rather averagely, against Westmeath, let's say, and scraped over a result, and all of a sudden the whole narrative changes. It is incredible. But look, I suppose that's kind of the beauty of the format, in a sense that it can either make or break you. Like, look at Galway. Galway were in like the dregs after the league. I mean, it was Jesus. It was the county's football. Like, Joyce was nearly getting thrown under the bus. But now all of a sudden, look at them. They're back in the mix for fucking top 4 kind of honours, and they're saying, Jesus, these lads are right at it. It's all about that timing. It's critical.
Yeah, and you know what, lads, it actually will be a mouthwatering game, that Armagh Galway game, and it still just doesn't feel like championship football though, because there's nothing really. No one's going out, no one's exiting the competition, and even I thought even the atmosphere, Selly Park, Ryan, like I just feel, I don't know if these groups are working. I don't know if they're working or not. For me, it's been, I just think there's too many games. There's too many games to get to where you are, like, with still 3 teams left. Like, I don't know what your views are on that, Ryan, but I'm not a big fan of the system, to be honest.
Exactly, Stephen. I agree. There's probably too many safety nets. Like, Cork go and beat Donegal. Really and truly, that should be enough to get you through the All-Ireland quarter-final. But Cork now have to go and beat Tyrone. And, Tyrone have been mediocre throughout this campaign. But if they go and beat Cork, Tyrone are going to finish top of the group. So again, it's a wee bit, there's maybe too many games that don't mean enough. Now, the big thing for me is, if you look at any of Donegal's big performances, when they took out Derry, they had whatever length of time. They knew that draw 6 months out.
Yeah.
And they only had a week turnaround to play Cork. And what I noticed there against Cork, Donegal's players, like the Patter Mogan, didn't score. Ryan McHugh only got a point. Kieran Thompson, their whole half forward line didn't score. Kieran Thompson, Dara O'Beal, and one of the O'Donnells. So you have to give credit to Cork. Cork obviously had their homework done. They had a wee bit longer to prepare for that game, and like they scored the goals. And with Cork's pace that they have on a turnover, they are a dangerous animal. There's no guarantee. The thing that Cork's lacking is consistency, and there's no guarantee that they will now go and beat Tyrone. Unfortunately, if you're
that's something, lads, we've chatted about in the show. Like Ryan made a very good point there about Cork. Like Cork are one of the biggest myths in the GA. Like, you know, the athleticism, the pace, the strength, the size. They've everything, like, you know, even the finance and like they've got everything. They've got everything. Like, and I suppose, like, if there's ever a result that's going to really ignite you and drive you on and give you that momentum, it's got to be that one at the weekend. But this is a Cork team, lads, who last year, you know, knocked Roscommon. Roscommon were playing well last year, going really well, had been promoted or had stayed in Division 1. Davies' first year, they were motoring nicely, and Cork beat them in that knockout game in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I don't know if you remember it, like, but the intensity they played at that day, the press, and they have that in their locker, ledge, but it's just that level of consistency that Ryan talks about. It's so hard to get, isn't it? Like,
It is. And in fairness, I saw a stat there on Twitter over the weekend that they've won 7 of their last 8 games. I think Kerry was the only loss. So like there's definitely the trend is going in the right direction for them. I think you're right though. I think they need to back up a bit of a signature win against Tyrone. I think that will kind of really put them back in the conversation a little bit. Not for breaking into that top 6 or 7, but like just for Cork football again being on the right direction. The thing for them then it'll be tricky is if a team goes and sets up to mirror them. You know, how can they break that down when they're not given those turnovers? Kind of the same question with Armagh. If they're not given the 80, 90 yards to use their athleticism, if they have to go and create scores with playing against 13 behind the ball, that's where Cork will struggle small. But like I think Tyrone are kind of ripe for they're ripe for a beating. I think, to be honest with you. I mean, like again, Tyrone are as inconsistent as anyone at the moment, and you just don't know what Tyrone team could show up on a given day. But listen, I thought Cork were really good. I thought some of the efficiency on transition was really impressive. Like what did they score? 3-9.
Yeah.
Okay, look, what Donegal scored 17 points. Still conceded 17 points or 18 points, whatever it was, playing a heavy blanket, playing against a heavy blanket. So look, all is not perfect with Cork, but if Tyrone give Cork opportunities to transition, they will be able to do damage.
Yeah, and Ryan, you know, from a psychological point of view, there's nobody better at the psychology side of things than Jim. Like, but it's Jim's first defeat, you know, as returning Donegal manager. It's that group's first defeat, first setback. As I said, the Clare game is a perfect tonic for them. If they were going to Healy Park next week or playing Tyrone in the athletic grounds or somewhere neutral, you know, you'd be thinking to yourself, there's a big test for him. But he'll get the show back in the road. But the one damaging aspect of that defeat, Ryan, is that there probably is now people do buy into that sort of air of invincibility with McGuinness. You know, Jimmy's winning matches, and you know, there's an element of Jesus that they won Ulster by beating Derry, Tyrone, and Armagh. There's no harder way to win Ulster, and that invincibility tag starts to build and gather momentum, and then you get another convincing win over Tyrone. Now there's a little chink in the armor, and now teams, you know, in and around Donegal, as you say, your Tyrones, your Derrys, your Armaghs, and all, they'll all be thinking, you know what? Yeah, you know, this team is very beatable now, you know, and that can lead into a psyche of a group too, Ryan.
Yeah, and I suppose it's out of their hands now as well, Stephen. Like, if Cork don't beat Tyrone, then Tyrone are going to top the group, which obviously means then Donegal are going to have to play another game. And it means I feel Donegal are brilliant when they've loads of time to prepare for an opponent, and McGuinness can properly drive home the game plan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it's definitely it's just a wee bubble burst, but yeah, Donegal, perfect game against Clare, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to Clare. They'll take care of that. But the big thing now is they're potentially not going to top the group, and they could end up playing I don't know if they can play a Derry again, but they're going to probably finish second in the group, and then they're going to play a third place team somewhere else. So they're relying on a decent draw to get the momentum up and going again.
Yeah. And I know, lads, you know, we talk about structures and organisation. We talk about Cork, you know, and having that level of consistency in your performances. Like, but this Meath team that played against Kerry, like, I know defensively, like, okay, right, you swallow your pride. I think you've used the word swallow the ego a few times, like, and you have Colin O'Rourke coming in who wants to play a certain way and wants to play the game in a certain way and talks about the game, you know, on when he was a pundit in a certain way of you know, kick the ball, etc. But like, they tried to sit with a deep block, and it was absolutely pathetic. That first half probably for me was one of the worst defensive displays I've seen from a team, Ledge, with 15 men inside their own 45.
Yeah. There's two sides to it. First of all, look, in fairness to Colin O'Rourke, he went and took a gig, you know, which a lot of pundits don't. So look, fair play to him. He's doing that. Obviously, he's all the necessary incentives to do it. But let's say he went and put his foot in, right. I saw him afterwards saying there's not a whole load of Conor Callans or David Cliffords around Meath. Okay, that's fair enough. But I don't see that as that's not a coverall to save you from poor coaching. Like, okay, fair enough. If Meath are meant to be this kicking, attacking team and all the rest of it, like I didn't see that yesterday. I mean, they had shots. They had shots from the top of the D. They had shots from. They were shooting from wild angles. And fair enough, you're playing a blanket. You might be expending more energy to go up the field, but like there's a lack of forward thinking there as well, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, O'Rourke knew since the start of this year he's playing in Samaguar. He knew for a fact that okay, we're going to have to cut our cloth to measure a little bit. We have to defend. Like I don't see why it has to be one or the other. I don't see why it has to be all out defense or all out attack. Is there not? Like the game is based off both sides of the field. Can you not have a blend of the two? And I think just saying we're building and look, we don't have the players and all the rest of it. There's a certain element of cop out in that for me because like let's say, look at Loud. Are you saying Loud have better individuals than Meath do? I wouldn't say so. I think Loud are just better coached. I mean, there was an occasion yesterday for the David Clifford goal, right? Yeah. And again, this is talking about not knowing your role. And people say it's easy to put 15 men behind the ball. It's absolutely not because it has to be collective. And I saw there was an occasion, I think it was O'Halloran, was it? He was on Paddy Clifford. He was tagging him for the day. And Thomas Sullivan was running in behind him. He saw him. He left a good defensive position to run out and put his hands on Paddy Clifford's chest, who was no threat. Left the danger. Thomas Sullivan pops it into Clifford. Clifford bangs it home. That for me just strikes to lack of role clarity. And the idea that you have to go midway through the year with a week's notice to try and play defensively, it's absolute rubbish as far as I'm concerned. He's had a full year that he could be preparing for this. And I don't understand why it has to be all out one or all out the other. There's surely to God is there a blend that you can do somewhere. And yes, maybe you're still probably not going to win that game, but you could at least put up some sort of a performance. But like as far as I can see from Meath, like defensively, yes, they need 15 behind the ball and it doesn't really work for them. Offensively, I'm not exactly seeing it either. So like, what is it with them, you know?
And getting that balance between attack and defense, Ryan, it's a hard juggling act, isn't it? Like it's a hard balancing act that, you know, sometimes you obviously want to be defensively stable, you want to stay in the game, you want to be competitive, you want to go down and stretch with teams, you know, but you do need to have that plan, that offensive plan. You do need to, you know, flick the switch, whether it's a pressing game, whether it's a middle third press, whatever. You know, there has to be that balance, Ryan, in your play these days.
But no, Stephen, now, if you compare Louth to Meath, I feel like Louth, obviously, I know we've been giving off a wee bit of it, Mickey Hart and maybe Horst Devlin with the way Derry's going this year, but in fairness to Louth, they seem open to playing defensively if they have to, and then if they're able to go and hit a team in a counter-attack, and obviously they have the forwards up front, like the likes of Mulroy and that, but I'm not too sure, if you turn Meath around and say, lads, we're going to play ultra-defensive, a lot of them players are willing to do that. They might nod and say, yeah, this is our game plan, we'll go with it. But Meath probably still see themselves as a very much traditional team, and I think as a result of that, they're not willing to change. Louth have definitely passed them out, and you know, Louth are clearly number 2 team in Leinster. They've been to the last 2 Leinster finals, and only that Kildare's going so bad. I actually think Meath are dropping massively. Like they were a much better team when McEntee was in charge of them a couple of years ago. They're always very competitive in the Super 8s. Now they didn't maybe get out of the group, but I don't see much improvement in Meath at all. And like Louth beat them by how much was it last week as well? So they're going to. It's probably another example of a nothing game where they're still going to Monaghan, and if they win that, they can still get through probably on the head to head. So again, I think Meath there's not the same progress that Colin O'Rourke would.
You'd be safer maybe just losing that game and slipping out of the championship gracefully, because they could end up getting an awful tanking against a Dublin or someone in the quarter final. But like, you know, you look at even yesterday, lads, like leaving Tom O'Sullivan, you know, giving Tom O'Sullivan some of the space, who probably is one of the most influential cornerbacks in Ireland, like, you know, and it's amazing, lads, because cornerback now has probably become a very pivotal position in that you're actually seeing more ball than most of the players on the field, you know, and it's maybe getting to the stage now we are nearly going to be looking at having these sort of ball playing defenders rather than actually man marking defenders. Like it could be going that way, Ledge.
Yeah, like you think of there's a crossover to the hurling for a second. I know, sacrilegious, I know, but like you look at Barry Nash with Limerick cornerback, you know, transform attacker, put him in cornerback because most teams are dropping the corner forward out, and he's one of the best defensive weapons that they have. You know, it's something very similar in GA. Like I mean, you actually need total football. Like you need to be able to. I think you need players that have to be able to defend, have to be able to attack. Yes, you will probably have your handful of pure utter man markers. Let's say your Mick Fitzsimons, for example, who's just a man marker. But for the most part, yeah, McCabe, yeah. But for the most part, you have to be very comfortable in those positions. And because so many teams are doing what we're talking about earlier, where they're putting 13 inside that 45 and then kind of manning up on teams who are dropping numbers back, your let's say your half backline, but your full backline has to be very comfortable on the ball. They have to be creative. They have to be careful on turnovers. Like you look at for Derry's turnovers yesterday, was Rogers, in fairness, who doesn't normally turn over a ball, but yeah, there's a turnover. And who was it? Was it Connor Doherty was the other cornerback, maybe, or McCluskey? Like there's two turnovers from one of your cornerbacks and one and your midfielder. But teams have to be comfortable. And in fairness, like Thomas Sullivan's not exactly a secret that he's that he's a top end footballer. You know, that has to be. But like you look at where he was shooting from yesterday. I mean, there was no pressure. There was no zest to go and get him. And that was me playing with the wind in the first half. Like it's just like I'd say Thomas Sullivan won't have a handier day. Like Brian O'Bugleg even as well. Did he get 3 from play, 4 from play? Like it's and in fairness, look, I'm not blaming me. You can't go and just try and think you're going to be sorting this whole defensive thing out in a week. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. And lads, just to maybe conclude the show this week, like we have to mention this. Like we're in a situation now in 2 weeks' time where there's 2 groups that can actually be decided with a team going through without having actually won a game. Like if you just take a step back, where in world sport would that actually happen? Like it just defies logic, Ryan. You know, that you can actually have like Derry and Westmeath could draw, and Westmeath go through without having won a game. You know, and haven't been beaten in the championship by Wicklow. So Westmeath could lose in the championship by Leinster Championship by Wicklow. Then they go and lose their first 2 games of an All-Ireland series, draw their last game, and then find themselves in the last 12 in All-Ireland. It doesn't make sense. Like Roscommon the same, lose their opening game in Connacht to Mayo. Or sorry, was it Galway or Mayo in the Connacht Championship? And then they lose their first 2 games and they go to Cavan and draw and are through. Doesn't make sense, Ryan.
No, and it probably, Stephen, you're not that excited by a lot of the games coming up. No. And as you said, really and truly, a lot of these teams, they'd be better off. Maybe I know you don't want to lose any game, but they'll probably get a bit of a hiding in the next round anyway, even if they do slip through. The one thing I would say now, the likes of a Louth, who are a team progressing, and you know, if they happen to get a result, maybe win one match, you're saying that's their big game. They can maybe identify a certain match and say, if we win this structure suits us, we can get out of the group. And that's progress for them. But the likes of a Roscommon, who you said have lost 2 games, maybe lost 3 in the bounce when you count Connacht as well, and they are going into their last game. I don't see the confidence being that high throughout that group, because them Roscommon players probably see themselves, you know, challenging. They're a lot better than what they're showing. So it can be good for a so-called lesser team that are on an upward curve. The likes of the so-called bigger teams, I think you're like a Derry. We actually don't know what way they're going to respond now, even though they have still a massive chance of getting through out of the group. You just get a feeling that they're in no man's land and they don't really know if they want to go through.
Yeah. And that's how important do you feel the 2-week break will be for these teams? The likes of Armagh, Galway, you know, obviously both teams, I can't see both teams holding back. I think both teams are going to go full out for the win, you know. Yeah,
I think it's important, and you just don't know what you'll get in that preliminary round. You could be playing anyone and likely. But see, this is where it gets skewed, because let's say you finish second. As Ryan said, you could get a 3rd place team who have no confidence, who don't particularly want to be there, and it could work out nicely for you that you get a little fine tuner before a quarter-final.
Or you could get a Derry.
Exactly. So look, when this was originally thought up, they were like, right, we want more meaningful games. Remember the Super 8s? There was a load of dead rubbers, and it's like, right, we need more meaningful games. Well, we're getting meaningful games, but it's like a prize for everyone in second class. You know, whether you finish first or last, everyone gets a little trophy. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, but I'll just go back to, I don't know if you're the same as me. The most enjoyable championship I've watched probably in a long time was the COVID championship, where it was knockout. 100%. You know? And it got rid of all of these issues about different teams being at different levels, because it allowed for the 1-day knockout excitement. And the chance of, like, look at Cavan and Tipperary winning provincials. That just doesn't happen in the current setup. And look,
100%.
I'm not saying that's the answer. I saw Neil Ewing from Sligo today on Twitter. He was saying, how about you have a Super 6? So you have your 4 provincials and your top 2 seeded teams from the league playing 3-3, home and away, and then you have your semi-finals and final. Like, I think that might be exciting, because realistically, you do not have I don't think you even have 8 competitive teams in the country at the moment. You probably have max, I'd say 4, that could
Yeah,
maybe 5.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so you need to try. Look, it's not an easy fix, but as far as I'm concerned, it's farcical that some teams can go in without a win. It's just it totally make it's just squeeze. It looks like it's just squeezing money out of people for games, and people are starting to like look. What was that the one of the Celtic Cup games this year? 70 or 75 for Tipperary Longford. I know it's not the most appealing game, or for
75 people.
Longford and Waterford.
Jesus.
Look,
75 people.
75 people. Look, it's not ideal, but I don't
But you know
think the
what?
current
You know what, though,
format.
Ledge? This is my take on it, Ryan. I don't know. Like we're opening a can of worms. We sit here all day talking about it. But for me, like the league is a great product, right? I would extend the league. I would have 10 teams in each division. I would have a playoff system where the top 4 in Division 1 go into a playoff to win it, the bottom 4 into a playoff to get relegated. You know, and all of a sudden then you're producing 10, 11 games, league football, right? Lads are going to be playing on a week basis. Supporters are going to get to see their best players playing every week. Okay, and it's exciting. There's something at stake in every division. Okay, bar the bottom division, obviously, you could have the bottom division where you could have the top 6 or something in a playoff, but like a playoff type system where it gives every team in the league. So you could be sitting in that middle 2 in a league of 10. You could be sitting in the middle 2, and you could either be promoted or contest in the league, or you could actually be in the danger of relegation. Very few dead rubbers right to the end. Then you have your Sam Maguire. Just go and play it. 32 teams into a hat. Down at home to Kerry. Imagine the buzz in Newry. Imagine Park Isler full to the rafters. Fermanagh at home to Dublin, Ryan. Even though you know you're probably going to get beaten, you're going there with a real buzz, real atmosphere. You know, there's a real carnival championship feel to the game. You know, and you have that. Everyone gets that. But then have your Tailteann Cup, which is for your Division 3 team, like the EFL Trophy in England, and then have a Paddy O'Shea Trophy, whatever, for just all the Division 2 teams. So you do have cup competitions, but like for me, Sam Maguire, yes, everyone needs entitlement to playing it. Give them a chance, but home and away, knockout draw. Geez, imagine some of the ties. Imagine Dublin Drew Kerry in the first round. Be a full house people. You know, I don't know. I just think we're missing a real serious trick. And Ryan, the other thing too, the build up to the game. Someone said it to me in school today. I didn't even know Down were playing. Now, not me. A fellow colleague said to me today, I didn't even know Down were playing. Like, there's no talk of like other games. I bought the Irish News the other day, thinking it was a massive preview of GA stuff. Half the games weren't even mentioned, like, and you're going, geez, I didn't know that game was on, didn't know that game was on. Do you know what I mean? There's no build up to the games or anything.
100%, Stephen, and it's not just the Sam Maguire as such; it's the Tailteann Cup as well. And
Yeah.
you know, there's too many teams even getting through there in the group. Like Waterford, I think they won 2 games; they didn't get through because they got hockeyed against Kildare. But like in third place, you have Tipperary, who ended up losing to Waterford in the Munster Championship. They got through in a third place. London got through. Okay, London, they did win their first game, but still New York. I think Wicklow are the other team. Wicklow in the first game maybe got beat by 15 points by Fermanagh. So it's a problem throughout for both competitions. And as you said, one-off knockout, the qualifiers was probably a lot more exciting than what we've got now. And we're only probably 3. Is this the 3rd year into this structure?
Yeah.
So that's the worrying thing, lads. If we keep on, going at this, what's year 4, year 5 going to be? And I don't actually know if the Tailteann Cup, the winners, has really helped. Like Westmeath, yes, have been competitive, but like Meath haven't kicked on.
No.
So, and like if Down, probably they're the one team that would see themselves as trying to win it. But if Kildare win it, are they going to kick on next year in the All Ireland campaign? I'm not too sure. So I definitely think you need to look at it from a player's point of view, but also from an excitement supporters point of view, because the times don't lie, lads.
Yeah. Lads, thanks a million, and we'll chat again soon. Thanks, lads.
Cheers, lad. See you later.